Ridley Scott's Alien proved a genre-defining blockbuster, not just for horror and science fiction, and it also made a megastar out of Sigourney Weaver. In 1979, this film was unleashed upon us, the story of 7 space truckers, if you like, who answer a transmission of unknown origin and get more than they bargained for. Incredible performances, especially from John Hurt, Ian Holm, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton, and especially Sigourney Weaver. Veronica Cartwright and Tom Skerritt were very good too. And then we had Jonesy the Cat. The design of the creature, which I've painted behind me, that's my painting. The design of the creature by H.R. Giger, fantastic, brilliant. What an amazing vision. All of the design aspects have proven very influential, and it strikes me as odd that not one Ridley Scott film, despite many nominations, has ever gotten the award for art direction, but that's another topic and probably pointless anyway because, well, the Academy rarely gets it right anyway. So, the legacy of Alien. I held off including this as a favourite film originally because, well, James Cameron's Aliens is a better film. It not only expands and deepens the lore, but improves upon it. We get some sense of where the eggs come from, the Queen. The emphasis on not only suspense but action as well was absolutely first rate. And the set pieces, especially the Queen versus Ripley at the end, fantastic. Ridley Scott's Alien is much more minimalist. You don't see a lot of the alien, but I like that, and I agree with Ridley Scott, as he said in his audio commentary, that you see enough of the alien. You do. You just get enough of it. And then, as everything comes together, there are a couple of funny little anomalies, if you like. There's a scene where a prosthetic head is then directly cut to the head of an actor, and that's awkwardly done. That could have been done better with a dissolve. You can tell there's a guy in the suit, creature suit, at the end, in one shot in particular, which is a little bit off-putting. But other than that, from a design standpoint, Scott knocked it out of the park here, and so did his collaborators. This was a very hard film to make. I've been listening to, watching the Just Falling About podcast, which Michael Bean has recently started. He was talking to Veronica Cartwright about Alien and just some of the travails and different struggles that they went through in making that. In fact, there was a strike, I think, at one point during the filming. But so many inspiration. And if we can just talk for a moment about John Hurt, his famous scene, and it makes me laugh because you have these method actors who will go put themselves around hell. They'll dress in the same clothes for 3 days, not eat anything, won't wash, or they'll hyperventilate to get a performance. He didn't do any of that. He acted. It's like what Laurence Olivier said to Dustin Hoffman on the set of Marathon Man. Hoffman shows up, he had slept, had eaten, terrible clothes, whatever. And he said, "Dear boy, what happened?" He said, "I did all this to get into the part. What am I supposed to do?" Act. Hurt is absolutely incredible. I mean, one of the best scenes of its type ever done. If you know the full context of the scene, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it yet, because people are discovering these classic films more and more. I mean, heck, what's the alternative? The newer films are rubbish. But in a way, that's kind of a good thing, because movies that came out like 20, 30 years ago, you go back and you watch them, they're at such a higher level of quality now because the quality is so low. With newer films, we've got The End of Oak Street, which is rubbish, and all these new things that are coming out, and it's just very little innovation. No originality to speak of. The most original film in the last 30 years being John Malkovich. It was made in 1999. There have been a couple of original films since, but, it's a dead art now for that. And I love Jerry Goldsmith's score of Alien. It wasn't one he was particularly fond of, especially like the main title. He'd done something a little bit more lighter, romantic, more classical. I love what's in the final film. I watched the theatrical version of this again the other day, and it was just the artistry and the creativity that went into it. And I love how he sets the mood in that opening time. He said he only did it in like 15 minutes, or he wrote it in like 15 minutes, whereas the more romantic alternative was it took a day, but it was the wrong setup for it. They tried to do something like that with Jed Kurzel's Alien Covenant, but that didn't work. So, Alien, I'm adding it to my favourite films. And a last word, just very briefly, about cinematographer Derek Van Lint. Not enough gets said about the guy and his contribution to Alien. More gets said about Alien 3 and, well, whatever people get out of that experience. As far as I'm concerned, there's James Cameron's Aliens, Ridley Scott's Alien, and the audiobook of Alien 3, directed by Dirk Maggs and starring Michael Biehn and Lance Henriksen. Full stop. That's it. Anything else is just fan fiction or just wishful thinking. Anyway, that's my pick for today. Favourite film, Alien, an absolute masterpiece. And on a final note, I will say that if we're talking serious about it now, there have only been perhaps maybe 100 masterpieces total made in the cinema, and Ridley Scott's film is one of them. Well deserved.